Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kitchen, I thought it was interesting that you said that the advantage that China may have because of data is diminishing because things like ChatGPT are based on the entire universe of the internet, which has both good and bad data in it. And then Mr. Wang, you said that DoD is really relying on sort of tagged, annotated data. I guess I'm trying to understand what is the best data that is needed for AI to be effective in military applications, and does China have an advantage on that kind of data or not? And I'd love both of your answers on that.
So both data are important. Both sort of open source data that is accessible on the internet. That's a key data source for large language models like ChatGPT, as well as high quality annotated data sets. ChatGPT and its precursor InstructGPT were trained on large quantities of high quality expert generated data, and it's an important data source to ensure that these systems are more trustworthy, truthful, responsible, et cetera. So both matter, but when we look towards, again, military implementations of AI, the key is what is the military data that these models are trained on. Right now, the models that are used by consumers and are present in the private sector are trained on essentially no military data. As a result, if you tried to apply these without any additional data towards military problems, they would not perform particularly well. So as we look towards applying artificial intelligence to the military, we need to have military AI-ready data sets that are ready for this kind of deployment. When it comes to that kind of data, I think probably today you would say it's a jump ball. I think that PLA is looking deeply at this issue and the DoD is looking deeply at this issue, but we have all of the fundamentals to have an insurmountable advantage because the DoD generates 22 terabytes of data, far more data than the PLA generates on a daily basis. So if we can instrument this data into one central repository, we can come out ahead.
So there being, and then on Mr. Kitchen's comments, there being a surveillance state of just getting data from all their citizens is not really going to be helpful for the military data sets that are needed to solve military problems, correct?
It will be a very limited help, and military data is, orders of magnitude more valuable for military problem sets.
Mr. Kitchen.
Yes, sir. I completely agree with what Alex is saying. I think the application matters. So in military applications, particularly anything that would be tactical or kinetic, military-generated, well-curated data is really going to be the key differential. The point that I was trying to raise when I mentioned the data advantage perhaps swinging back our way, it's in one sense aspirational. Part of the hope of generative AI is that over the course of time, we'll be able to generate what's called synthetic data. So instead of data that's been produced via normal economic activity or military activity, that Gen AI, generative AIs, are able to then begin generating synthetic data sets that would be useful for training. I suspect that we're, number one, not there yet, and number two, that those data sets will be helpful for broad economic application, but not at all the type of, or it will be supplemental to the type of military applications that Alex was discussing.
Thank you. Dr. Mahmoodian, thank you for your testimony. I know Secretary Esper had introduced an AI framework guidelines for DoD. I'm not sure if that's been updated now. Are there things you'd want the DoD to do more in terms of the ethical guidelines framework for the use of AI?
So the DoD, as I mentioned, they already have AI ethics principles in place. So one comment that I would have about that is how we can make these frameworks from abstract to a practical form of view. And that comes with the education of the personnel, to make sure that personnel understand what these principles mean and how they can actually, in practice, apply to their use cases that they're working on. So that's the first step. The second step is the implementation of AI governance. So when we're talking about policies, processes that their AI governance would have, those measurements that would be part of this process would include the principles that they have. So it's all about people and the process. And obviously the technology, how we are going to measure those risks that we may identify in a use case. These are all part of the technology aspect of it, designing the technology in a way that it would provide explanation of why the system made certain decision. And I'm
Thank you.
the time.
Thank you.
Mr. Gates, Esquire, is recognized for 5 minutes.